How's everybody doing? Today's video is going to be a rundown of my top 3 favorite guitarists of all time. It's kind of weird to do it as a ranking, or it feels kind of weird, but that's the only way I could think of doing it. Anyway, let's get right into it. Number 3, Mato Nanji. Mato Nanji is a blues guitarist famous for his work with the band Indigenous. He's the frontman of Indigenous, he sings, he plays guitar for them. He has a really good voice for the bluesy style that they do, but his guitar playing is incredible. He's primarily a Strat player, and his playing style is incredibly soulful and rich. He incorporates some influence from other major Strat players throughout history, but if I had to pick any one all-time best Strat player, it would have to be Mato Nanji. His style is almost entirely based on feel, just pure, raw emotiveness, expressiveness of the instrument. And if there was anyone I'd say could make a guitar sing better than anybody else, it would be Mato. His playing has such a natural flow to it and nothing ever clashes. He's a master of inflections. He uses slides and bends very creatively. You know, he'll do like a bend and then drop down, slide down, straight into another bend, and the guitar just wails out. He plays with so much conviction, he wrings that Strat out. I've noticed he uses a lot of contrast very subtly in his soloing, where he'll pluck a note real quick and then fall straight into a huge bend. But really, as far as the nuances of his style goes, I couldn't even tell you the half of it. I'm still picking up on things as I'm listening to it, and I've heard tons of his music, and I've heard it a lot. And I'll notice certain things that he does where I'm like, oh, it's just all these little details that allow that style to be created and to sound so good. Basically, his playing style is such that you immediately know you're enjoying it, but it takes a lot of analyzing to realize all the little nuances and fine details within his style that makes it so good. And it all amounts to the most perfectly soulful guitar playing that I've ever heard. I saw Indigenous live last year, and it was one of the best shows I've ever been to. They blew the roof off. So if you have any interest in blues or bluesy rock or that sort of thing, I encourage you to check out as much of their music as you possibly can. A good place to start might be with the song Leaving by Indigenous. That's a real heavy, amazing blues song, probably the best blues song I've ever heard. Or the song I'll Be Waiting by Indigenous. It has a couple of really nice solos in it. Either of those songs would give you a taste of Mato Nanji's style, and both of those songs feature some of the best solos I've ever heard in my life, hands down. You should definitely check it out. Number 2 is Rubia Mossad. Rubia Mossad is a guitarist who mostly plays hard rock / metal / progressive rock. He's mostly famous for his guitar work in the band Dorje, as well as the more progressive group Toska. Rabea excels at rhythm playing to the point where it made me reevaluate my own approach to guitar playing in general. I've always been kind of a lead-focused guitarist myself, and of course I've heard riffs over the years that I thought were really good, but I never understood how good a riff could possibly be until I heard Rubia Mossad's music. He has written some riffs that can't even be described. His riffs largely incorporate really chunky sounding metal phrases, as well as elements of funk and whatever else he feels like throwing in there. Rubia's playing is always so fresh sounding that it's almost a disservice to call it metal in a way, because that gives people kind of a preconceived idea. But his playing style is super fresh and super heavy. I think what makes Rubia's style so nice to listen to is that he doesn't write in the path of least resistance. What I mean by that is, when most people write music, I think they tend to look at their instrument as far as patterns going across the instrument, and it's natural to write something where you're doing a progression of notes and then maybe some kind of a step and then another progression of notes, you know, ascending or descending or whatever, but it usually ends up being kind of a sequential thing. I mean, that's just naturally how a lot of people write. Because mentally, I think people are just inclined to keep things sequential and normal and make it easier on themselves. With Rubia Mossad's music, that does not seem to be the case. It is all over the place. He'll change time signatures. He will jump from the lowest string on the 3rd fret all the way up to the highest string on the 16th fret, just back to back real fast. And a lot of his riffs just sound percussive, just in your face, and beautifully chaotic. I've actually had a really fun time recently just learning songs of his, just because of how unique his writing style is. It's been kind of eye-opening for me. Another thing is, Rubea is really good at using softer, like ambient sounding parts as contrast to some of his incredibly heavy riffs. He can also shred like a motherfucker when he wants to, which is not as often as I would if I could play like that. He has a really broad vocabulary of scales, patterns, chords. Of course, I suggest that you check out as much of his music as you can. The main projects that he's been in recently have been Dorje and Toska. A good place to start might be with the Dorje song Outspoken. There's a riff in there that's pretty mind-blowing. The riff is about 4 minutes in, but you really can't miss it. It's heavy as hell, but it's super fast, and it has huge contrasting parts. Actually, that riff is the only piece of instrumental music that literally made me cry the first time I heard it. It is that powerful. But he has a lot of just unbelievably good riffs. Another good song to check out would be the song Infantile by Toska. It's a bit smoother sounding, a bit more cohesive sounding, but it's a totally epic song. So check those out. Number 1, Buckethead. Buckethead is totally unique. I would say he's mostly known for his shredding, but that is only one facet of his playing. Buckethead's style incorporates avant-garde, metal, hard rock, blues, funk, classical guitar, some chicken pickin' country stuff, a lot of ambient music, some completely primal music. The list goes on. Basically, Buckethead's style is so diverse at this point that it's really nearly impossible to categorize. He shreds with some of the cleanest technique I've ever seen. He mostly does really pleasant minor shred patterns, but he does sometimes go into the realm of chromatic or even completely atonal patterns. He picks like a monster. He uses hybrid picking. He plays slap guitar phenomenally well, and he's the only guitarist I've ever seen to use 4-finger tapping. On top of that, he's a great riff writer. He has a distinct style of writing that's pretty heavy and usually pretty catchy. I've seen Buckethead live a handful of times, and I saw him twice last year. What really struck me about both of those shows was how good his technique was. He's always been a shredder, and he's always had this phenomenal endurance to the point where it's really an athletic accomplishment the way that he can play. But long story short, when I saw him recently, I was captivated by not only his fretting hand and just the smoothness of all of the patterns that he pulled out of that, but mostly by his picking hand. So what I noticed was, as he was playing, in order to accommodate shifting styles so many times, his picking hand was really morphing all the time. Now, I would say a lot of guitarists do that whether they're aware of it or not. I know I've had to consciously shift my picking style depending on what I'm playing, but I've never seen anybody morph their picking style in such an effective, organic way as Buckethead. And he needs to do that to accommodate all the different things he's doing, because he might be shredding 1 second and then he'll pull out some hybrid picking and then he'll just go into, let's say, several finger tapping, go back into shredding, play a little bit of lead for a while, do some slap and go into a shred, and he has to do all that without fatigue. Buckethead has giant hands and he picks fast as hell. And he does it without any tension in his hand or in his picking arm. A lot of people you'll see pick and their arm is like locked up at the elbow, or their hand is like, looks like it's real tight, but Buckethead, the way that he plays looks like a really smooth machine just operating, like you're watching a sewing machine or something, just hammering those notes out, and it's just fluid, and it's like it's never going to be fatigued. That's what it looks like. And all the different techniques that he uses, he has virtually perfected them, and he transitions between them flawlessly, very smooth. That takes a stupid amount of practice to get to that level of conditioning, and that makes Buckethead nearly faultless as a player and as a performer. Buckethead has released literally hundreds of albums covering so much territory musically. And his writing style has evolved pretty remarkably across his career, from initially seeming like he wanted to get a lot of things studio perfect, and everything was just very perfectly done. And with some of his more recent work, it seems like he's shifted his focus to just creating the purest artistic expression, whether that means hammering out some perfect riffs and just very cohesive and well thought out, or if that means playing a slower kind of ambient solo as if doing an abstract painting, which is incredible. He has a website, bucketheadpikes.com, where you can find his most recent several hundred albums, which is crazy to say. And he has a ton more music on iTunes, Amazon, etc. So I encourage you to go check out as much of his music as you can. From one album to the next could be a drastically different style, but that's just what's going to happen when you have that much music out. If I had to point you in some direction, I would say if you want something heavy, maybe start with Shores of Molokai. That song is complete chaos. It's very heavy, it's really cool. And if you want something a little bit softer but with really good leads, one of his most iconic songs is called Soothsayer. Check that one out. He gets a lot softer and a lot more ambient than that as well. He also has a ton more heavier work. You just have to browse. Buckethead is such a good player. So those are my top 3 favorite guitarists of all time. If you watch this video, check out some of the music I talked about. I'll put a few links in the description, but there's so much more out there if you search it out. This video seems like kind of a plug, but I just have so much respect for these guys, for all 3 of these guys, that I just felt compelled to talk about it. And maybe some of you guys who are watching this will discover some new music today. Likewise, leave a comment with some of your favorites and I'll check them out. If you like this video, please share it and subscribe to my channel for more guitar and music related content. Thanks for watching.